and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Torchwood episode Day 1, written by Chris Chibnall, his first script for the Doctor Who franchise, and directed by Brian Kelly. Now, Torchwood has the opportunity to tell some of the best stories in the revived series of Doctor Who. In fact, it would go on to tell those stories, some of the most hard-hitting dramas. But that's not what people talk about when they think Torchwood. When they think of Torchwood, they think of the show that tries too hard to try to appeal to a much more mature audience. And one episode that gets talked about a lot for just how silly, ridiculous, and how crap Torchwood can be is the episode Day 1, which features, above all else, a gas that becomes a symbiotic host to a girl and turns her into a murderer by having sex with people, and when people have orgasms, they explode into a puddle of dust. And it's one of those. It's one of the stories. It's second episode. It's a second episode that gave this story a massive reputation for being bad, for being a show not as that good. In fact, it was this story that, when this story was announced and when I heard so many people talk about it, that actually put me off watching Torchwood for many years until way after the 10th Doctor's run, maybe sometime around the 11th Doctor. My first story I watched was Miracle Day. Whether it's good or not, that's beside the point as of yet. This episode gave Torchwood a representation, the image that this show tries way too hard to appeal to an adult audience and is something to be spoofed, laughed at, and isn't to be taken seriously. Which is a shame, because it's okay. I mean, it's not amazing. It clearly has some issues, but it's not the worst. It's not like Love and Monsters where I mean, you can laugh at it. It's so bad, but I don't think it's that bad. I just think, but I think the worst. I think a lot of people hate this story mainly for the fact that this one episode really gave Torchwood a bad name, giving it this really poor reputation right at the start of the series. So yeah, it's kind of depressing, really. It's kind of depressing. But is this story any good? Does it deserve the bashing? Is Chris Chibnall, who I would like to add, fun fact, when Russell T Davies was coming up with the idea of the CSI Torchwood, which later developed into the Doctor Who universe connected Torchwood, he didn't actually have time to be the showrunner of it. He wrote an episode, he wrote the outline of the stories and the characters, but he didn't actually run the show because he was too busy, of course, doing Doctor Who and the Sarah Jane Adventures. So, Chris Chibnall actually has the distinction of being the unofficial showrunner for the first two series of Torchwood. And this will be Chris Chibnall's first real foray into Doctor Who. All stories in series 1 and 2 are show-run by Chris Chibnall, if anyone's interested in that. Which is kind of surprising because he would then go on to become the showrunner of Doctor Who itself in 2018. So that's really cool. But yeah, Chris Chibnall's first stab at the series. Let's see if it's any good or not. So let us begin. The story starts off with Gwen. Basically, she's starting her new day, her new job, working for Torchwood. The day after, we see her at a date with her boyfriend, only to be interrupted by a massive meteorite hovering over Cardiff and crash landing into a nearby forest, in which Torchwood calls up and needs her assistance. This brings up the idea of the characters not getting enough time outside of work to develop a hard-hitting relationship. Like Gwen, who does have a life outside of work. She's got her boyfriend. Oddly enough, we don't see any of her like friends and stuff, but we meet her boyfriend Reese, and Gwen is the soul of the story. Its story is about her first day, and she is like the main character. It's not like Doctor Who, where the companions have like some episodes. No, Gwen is always the main protagonist in a way. We always see things from her point of view, and we see her getting involved in the Torchwood surroundings, where her and the crew investigate the meteorite, and after witnessing some banter and seeing the rest of the Torchwood team just throwing tools around with no ease, she decides that when Owen Harper asks for a tool, that she would throw one at him, only for it to split into the meteor, releasing a gas creature that goes out into the atmosphere, which, you know, Gwen's first day, and she completely cocks it up. Everybody tells her, you know, don't worry about it, we'll sort this out. But Gwen is like, no, I am truly sorry. And this is such a relatable character arc, you know, struggling at your first day, getting basically almost everything wrong, not really seeing what you can do to justify your place in the team. She's basically an outsider. She's just joined the crew, and everybody else seems to be really connected with one another. But she seems like to be the standout of the crew, and everybody seems to have all these in-jokes, have all of these character beats together, but she kind of stands out as the person who looks around, and she kind of, sometimes it disturbs her because they seem to be joking and laughing at some serious and horrible situations. But they're used to seeing aliens and monsters all around Cardiff during their Torchwood days. So they don't have that big of a reaction to it. And the storyline here of Gwen's basically trying to prove herself works really well, and there's some really relatable moments with her. And Evelyn Meyer, the actress who plays Gwen, does a fantastic job at bringing out that relatability. Her cop training seems to be sometimes forgotten about. Like, there's a scene later on in the story where they surround a character only for her to let the person get through. So it's very strange in that regard. She seems to be, in certain places, a failure as a cop. But then we didn't see her much as a cop. She might have been a bad cop in terms of her being like a bodyguard kind of character, and her main attributes come from other places and other parts of her police job, which we'll see later on in the story. The gas, which turns out to be an alien sentient symbiotic creature, attracts itself to this young girl who has just left the bar and is sad and alone after her boyfriend seemingly stood her up, and she's on the phone crying to him, being absolutely pissed, but then she kind of still wants to see him. only for then the symbiotic creature to connect with it. Now here's an awesome fun fact, which unless somebody pointed it out to you, you wouldn't know. The alleyway that the symbiotic creature connects with the girl is the same alleyway in which Martha meets up with the Doctor at the end of Smith and Jones. That couldn't be perfect time. That couldn't be more perfect, as you know, I watched these stories back to back. So that's incredible. Now, the symbiotic creature makes her basically wanting sex, and every time she has sex with a male character and they finish the deed, they explode in orgasmic energy, and they die and turn into remnants of just dust, into ash. And basically it's up to Torchwood and the team to discover what's happening to her and trying to save everybody. Whereas at the same time we basically have a back of the ranch storytelling as we see Torchwood trying to get to know each other and track down the girl, whilst the girl is basically trying to work out what's happening with her and tries to manipulate things into her deeds. Now, this story has the topic of sexuality, and according to Chris Chibnall, the story idea came from Russell T Davies. However, Russell T Davies actually denies this and says it was Chris Chibnall's idea. I don't know who to trust. I could imagine that Russell T Davies, who has done a lot of discussions about sexuality in multiple of his stories outside of Doctor Who. I can imagine that it was Russell T Davies, and he just didn't want to take the credit for it because of how bad this story's reputation is. But anyway, the idea of sexuality is actually pretty decently handled here, as basically the story is basically about puberty and how we live in a society that glorifies sex, that makes you like, right, you would want sex more, even if you had to kill someone for it, sex is just this thing that people obsess with. In fact, Russell T Davies has stated on multiple occasions one of his favourite scenes in Torchwood is a scene in which the girl character, who after escaping the Torchwood building, is just wandering around as it cuts to images of posters of people in sexual poses. We see at one point a man with his bum out, some woman's knickers, probably at like Victoria Woods, Victoria's Secret, Victoria Woods, the comedian. Oh, that was a bad mistake on my half. Victoria's Secrets and all that. And the story does have a point here, We do live in a society that does glorify sex. I mean, like I state, Victoria's Secret, how the hell is that shop even like a thing? And the story doesn't really say that, sex is bad, but rather that we live in a society where sex is all we can think about, and it does have a great point there. I think the issue with it, and what makes this story stop from being as good as it could have been, is that this story simultaneously is going, right, this is kind of a messed up thing, that we glorify sex so much to the point that people who are just hitting puberty, which is represented here by the gas monster, is just overwhelmed by all of this sex and all of this sexuality just pondering around the world. But at the same time, it's also being the thing that it criticises as we get a lot of scenes in which it seems to be very sexual. There seems to be a lesbian kiss at one point between Gwen and the girl, which doesn't really play a part into the story and rather just is there to glorify and appeal to the more adult audiences. So that's what it's trying to do. It's saying, like, right, we put way too much focus on adult being mature, but at the same time, we need to be mature, so we need to have all of this sex and profanities and all this stuff in here. Can you see where the issue comes from? Now, I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. I think this story does have a lot to say about sexuality and the consequences of all this. But like I said, like at the same time, it's also being a part of what it's parodying, and I think that's where most of the criticisms comes from. If that does your head in, I totally understand. It's in fact, in some ways, in most ways, I agree with you, and I feel like it really hinders the story how it's doing what it's saying we shouldn't really do. However, I do think there's an underlying plot here that is mostly forgotten about by Torchwood fans and people who study Torchwood and Doctor Who, which I think gets overlooked. Gwen's character, as the story doesn't just revolve around, from the girl's perspective, it doesn't revolve really about her and her sexuality. It's all about Gwen's being the only one who has a real human connection and is coming into a world in which these people, they've kind of gotten so used to the fact that all of this alien creature stuff is happening that they could just eat Chinese, have fun, enjoy themselves, whilst there's a girl, an innocent bystander, crying in their basement. Isn't that messed up? That's one of my favourite scenes. You see the Torchwood team laughing. You do get the imagery of how Gwen is not as connected with the rest of the team as she sits there quietly watching everybody having a laugh, only for Jack to leave, and they're all trying to ask her like all these questions, revealing that they know nothing about Jack either. They know that he's probably American and he's most likely gay. In a nice little banter moment. But Gwen hears something on the monitor. She can hear something moaning as they turn on the screen, only to witness the girl crying. And Gwen is like, how the hell can we just be standing here enjoying ourselves whilst this poor girl is being basically tortured away? We need to find a way to help her. Now, and then we get into a scene in which Gwen Cooper is doing like her research as Jack asks her, it's like, okay, what should we do? And she connects all of these dots. She makes a profile about her, how she's a huge Heath Ledger and Orlando Bloom fan, how she lost her mother at the age of 10, and how her father's the only thing that's really connecting her to the real world. That is great. I love everything to do with Gwen here. The issue is that it doesn't actually play part into the story. Nothing Gwen does in terms of this aspect gets resolved into this story. For example, she talks about she needs, they want someone to connect her with the real world. So she wants Torchwood to bring her father down to the basement to talk to her father. Sorry if you can hear that. That's a really weird buzzing noise in my kitchen. Anyway, so that's like Gwen's main plot, main idea, is to bring her father into the story, only for it to be revealed soon after that she has the power to create to make people really horny around her, and then it's like, right, bringing her father was a terrible idea, let's not do that. And later on in the story, when they're trying to track her down, Gwen doesn't actually add anything to justify her there. It's really Toshika who has really nothing to do apart from having some witty moments in this story that reveals, it's like, right, I know what I would do, as we cut then to the girl and her ex-boyfriend basically planning on killing him. And then it's later on again where Toshika basically does her research and reveals that she works at a sex clinic, only for the girl to go to the sex clinic to try and get as much orgasmic energy as possible. If that's really distracting, one moment. Sorry, that's really distracting. I do apologise. Anyhow, so yeah, that's kind of really disappointing. You know, that Gwen's character. I think her character here is phenomenally well written, and she does prove herself in terms of being the relatable one, the one that connects everyone to the ground, and also showing her police working as she does all this research. But that never plays into the story, which means that her scenes kind of become redundant in this plot. Before I then go into the ending, there's two things I want to talk about. One is Owen Harper. Chris Chibnall loves Owen Harper. He gets some of the best dialogue, and this story really cracks me up every time he's on here. Sometimes I think his humour can be a bit degrading to the rest of the characters, but here I think it's played just enough right, just enough that his fun little moments, the one, he's the comic relief character, the one who takes none of this really seriously, just cracks me up. My favourite moment is when Gwen looks around and is like, do any of you have what do you do when you're not in work? What do you do when you're not stressing? And everyone goes silent, only for Owen to go, I torture people in happy relationships. Which is a fun little nod to future episode where he kind of does that with Gwen. Spoilers for later episodes. Oh well. And just Owen, he doesn't really have much of a character here. He's just sort of having these fun little joke lines, but they're always great and I love them. Another scene I want to talk about is when the girl tries to break out, and we get this really silly action scene between her and Jack. I felt that the directing and the action and the fight in that was really silly and really stupid. The directing overall is kind of a mixed bag. It's mainly bland and forgettable, how the story looks. For the majority of the part, there are some really great scenes. The scenes in the alleyway with that girl getting possessed, that looks visually stunning. But some bits like this action scene seem really weak and really like what was happening? What was happening there? Come on, Brian Kelly, you can do better than that. But she picks up the hand. Now the hand in a jar was seen in the last episode of Torchwood, and here we get a little bit more information about it. It seems to be something really important to Jack. He would risk letting the girl go out free, allowing her to kill hundreds of men in Cardiff just to keep the hand alive, only for then to her, when she escapes, to throw it to the floor, and Jack runs after the hand and not after the girl. But something clicks with the fan base. If you're a Doctor Who fan, coming into this as a Doctor Who fan, right here is where it clicks. As when Jack is holding the hand, you hear the motif of the 9th and Series 2 10th Doctor. You know, that that music plays. This isn't just any hand. This is the Doctor's hand. And for those of you who remember, in the Christmas Invasion, when the Doctor is fighting the Sycorax, he gets his hand chopped off and it falls to the earth. This is that hand. And what's really great is that there's no mention of it. There's no Jack going, this is a hand that belonged to the Doctor. We get all of this. It clicks with us just soon as that music starts playing. Fantastic. So anyway, they track her down to the sex clinic, a sperm bank, where she's killed a bunch of men, and Torch would have her surrounded, and Jack, being an immortal, only nobody else knows this, snogs her to the point where she is satisfied, or at least in the girl's body, of her sex drive. Basically implying that Jack is probably one of the best kissers of the universe. Like, usually she gets this orgasmic energy from pure sex, but she gets a complete dose, one to satisfy her urges, just by a kiss of Jack. Basically implying that Jack is like the best in terms of sexuality in the entire Doctor Who universe. That sounds about right. And Gwen basically is like, right, this is all my fault, and I can probably survive a bit more. So, creature, if you're listening, come to me. And first of all, Jack is like, go on then, it is your fault. You started this, you got to end it. As the rest of the torture team is like, you can't let this happen. As the gas creature comes out, heads for Gwen, only for Jack to throw a device, which was seen earlier on in the episode with Owen trying to capture the girl, which traps the sex gas creature and kills it dead. Gwen gives Jack then a kiss to say thank you. I'm not particularly a fan of this kiss. The kiss seems like a proper genuine kiss here, and that relationship between Gwen and Jack, I didn't really feel that here. But anyway, and the story ends then with Jack basically saying to Gwen, it's like, right, you are our grounded one. You're the one that keeps us human, keeps us making us realise what we're fighting for. So you don't lose your grounded sense, please, for me. As we see her then going on dates with her in the house with her boyfriend Reese, and they have like a little discussion. First of all, she's kind of like zoning out, but then they start talking, and then they're like, right, let's go to bed, implying that, they had sex. There you go. That's day one. Overall, this story has a lot of problems. And I don't mean like the logistics. I mean in terms of it being a story, a narrative thread. Gwen, despite her having some great moments and having her police and her character arc being realised, doesn't play into the story at hand. The story at hand is both trying to riff on these cliches of mature adult television and mature content, whilst at the same time being the thing that it's parodying, and is kind of saying, it's like, right, we should be ones to take the mick. We are something to be laughed at. Please laugh at us. Because we're laughing with you. We're technically laughing with you, in a sense. But I don't think it's all bad. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. Gwen's character here is still very likeable. There's some really great funny moments with Owen Harper. Some of his lines just really crack me up, and the actress who plays the girl does a fantastic job of showing this confliction in her face, and you can kind of see in her face when she is in her body, in her mind, or in the creature's mind. A creature which I like to say never gets named. It's only really credited as the sex gas or the sex monster. So there's that. So day one is it's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just okay. So there you go. That's one day from Torchwood. So join me next time when the Doctor takes Martha on her first adventure in time as they go back in time to meet the world's greatest writer. So I'll see you next time for the Shakespeare Code. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!